Burinsky, folks. Hi, happy Friday afternoon. Whoa, it's 11:49. I'm not sure I knew how late it was. Just cleaned up a bit for the show. Not really. No offense to you all. But I didn't clean up for you. I just cleaned up because my beard was getting really itchy. Yeah, so that's why I'm relatively clean shaven. I will say that the one side of my hair looks a lot poofier than the other side of my hair, so I'm not quite sure what's up with that. So anyhow, haircut is on the docket for soon as well. But what we are going to hop into right now, is another episode of What I Learned This Week, which may or may not, Dread, I see you sign in there, it may or may not soon become AMX Weekly. When I do like it, Dread. I'm not going to lie, man. I like it. AMX Weekly. And I do like that better than AMX Week. AMX Weekly, I even wrote it in Libsyn just to see what it would look like. And I think it looked pretty good. But we got to hear back from the boss. And I was going to say to hear what she said, but then some people might think that I'm referring to Amanda, who's the boss. But we're talking about another boss who we can't even talk about right now. I'm just kidding. I'm making that part up. Here, let's try this, Dred. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of AMX Weekly. This is the Spaniard. Oh, wow, that's a good one. I like it. I'll tell you this much too, folks. So yesterday, I was rolling around with the old kiddos, and my wife goes upstairs, and then she comes back down, and then she says, "Okay, Dad, you have a surprise." Who doesn't like surprises? I absolutely love surprises. I get giddy like a kid. I am like a child. I am actually like a child. There's actually child incarnations of myself in my own kids, because my own kids are me to a T at this point, especially my daughter. Oh my goodness, it's so crazy how like me she is with the obsessiveness and meticulousness, etc. But anyhow, so my wife came down and said, "A surprise for Dad." And I thought, what do you mean a surprise? I never get surprises. What do you mean? My wife's good with surprises. They're few and far between, but when they are good ones. So she bought me a book. And the book, hold on a second, I don't know if I shared it yet or not. Anyway, she bought me a book. And I'm going to say, I don't even know, a month or 2 months ago. So a while ago, I heard of this guy named Steve Rinella. And Steve Rinella is, let's just say, a hunting show guy, right? To put it like the most basic form. So what Steve Rinella does with hunting, I want to do with books and learning and or books and training, okay? But Steve Rinella's thing is hunting. And he has a show and a podcast. And I didn't know it, but a book called Meat Eater. Meat Eater, because he hunts and eats the meat that he hunts. So my wife bought me. So I started watching on Netflix a couple months ago his series, Meat Eater. It's on Netflix. If you're an outdoorsy person, hunter, you'll love it. Because this guy, it's not only just about the hunting. I love seeing it. I love seeing the outdoors, landscapes, beautiful terrain, etc., etc. But what it is he's freaking philosophical as all get out. He's life lessony out the ears, out the wazoo. He's philosophical. He reads lots of books and he references books. And that's what I absolutely love about it. So anyway, she bought me the book. I didn't know it. I didn't even know he had a book. And then she said, yeah, he has another book, a couple other books. Boom. I got right on Amazon and bought another one called American Bison. American Bison, that ties to our love for Native American history and culture. So I'm so freaking excited. I'm going to say freaking excited to read those books too. So right now, I finished Mr. Rogers' book. We have a couple more AMXs on that. I'm reading Unplugged, how to detach from technology, right? And become healthier and get reconnected with the world. And then I think I'm going to slip in Meat Eater. I'm so excited. Okay, let's get rocking and rolling. Let's get rocking and rolling on what I learned this week. 1, 2, 3. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another week of what I learned this week. I was just on Facebook Live. This was such a stinking great week of learning because this Mr. Rogers book, The Life and Work of Fred Rogers, touches me, speaks to me right in the heart. I'm going to say as much as any book has. There's probably a little recency bias there, but the book is so good and it's so relevant to what Dred and I are building. It's a tremendous book. I had some really cool experiences this week, last couple weeks at Penn State Harrisburg, and then my wife surprised me yesterday with a book. And I realize I'm talking with a lot of energy. This is not my radio voice. I'm just really excited. But she bought me a book written by Steve Rinella, and Steve Rinella is the host of a podcast called Meat Eater. He has a Netflix series as well. I learned of him through Joe Rogan. Anyway, he's a hunting extraordinary, but he loves books too. And I think that's the coolest part about it is the guy loves books. He's life lesson-y, just like myself. And I just love it. So anyway, it's really helped. And why do I want you to learn? Why do I want you to care about what I learned this week? Because the joy, the childlike joy and enthusiasm that you hear in my voice is coming from books and conversations and documentaries that I'm watching and consuming. And it's adding value to my life. And I truly believe with all of my soul that it will add value to your life in a variety of ways. Whether we're talking overall health and wellness, whether we're talking interpersonal relationships, whether we're talking leadership, whether we're talking just learning about a new thing like the outdoors or hunting or training, different ways of training your body, mindfulness, meditate, all of this stuff is contained. All of this gold is contained in books. In books, to me, I want to throw this out there too. So books to me, I've talked to several people where I say I read books. It's taking me 3 weeks or a month to read this book. And, they kind of like jokingly, but whatever, like, oh my gosh, that takes forever. Give me the audio book. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, trust me, I listen to podcasts on a regular basis, on a very regular basis. I don't listen to books on a regular basis, ever, hardly ever. Because to me, books are about more, I personally am more interested in extracting the lessons from books, whereas I consume podcasts as I'm doing other things. So when I read a book, I am OCD. It takes me a really long time, like 2 to 3 minutes to read a page per book because of all the notes and everything I'm taking. But why I do that, right? Why I don't just listen to books, and this is my personal preference. I'm not telling you what to do, or I don't think my way is better than your way. But tying into what we're talking about in the new book I'm reading, Unplugged, which talks about detaching from technology, if mindfulness is important, if being present is important, if being focused, single tasking, not multitasking, if that's important, which I think there's enough research and data to prove that it is important for our overall health and well-being as human beings, when I read a book, it forces me to be right here, right now. There is nothing else. I'm focused, I'm reading, boom, it's all right there. When I'm driving, listening to an audio book, I'm looking at the signs, I'm looking at the car, I'm thinking about training, I'm thinking about whatever, and I realize, oh wait, I'm not even listening. So to me, the practice of reading a book, the focus that it takes to read a book is a lot of the reason why I read a book. Just that practice, that focus, that focused energy and that focused attention, it's good for you. It's good for your mind. It's good for your heart. It's good for your soul. It's good for your heart and soul. All right, is that a Huey Lewis song, Heart and Soul? I don't know. Let's move into what I learned this week. I'm reading the book The Good Neighbor by Maxwell King, The Life and Work of Fred Rogers. So this is Spaniard speaking. When I say what I want most for you, okay, when we boil it down to, all right, what are we getting at? Why you do what you do? What I want most for you, and what I want most for you to take from Mr. Rogers is this, is just to be you. It's to be you. Now, it's interesting to read in this book, you know, it exposes all sides of Mr. Rogers, all of which are good, by the way. He's actually compared to Jesus and to saints in the book by colleagues of his who say this is not an exaggeration, right? So he is I'm going to say, one of the greatest humans I've ever known about. He wants you to be you, and he's been criticized by people for saying he's too soft, right? He's too soft. He's not maybe not hard enough, or not direct enough, or doesn't lay the smack down or the proverbial hammer enough. But here's the thing. I don't just say I want you to be you, and Mr. Rogers doesn't just say I like you just the way you are, and then that's that. Mr. Rogers lived a life of discipline, lived a life of hard work, lived a life of commitment. So this I want you to be you. I want you to feel good being you. It's not just fluff. It's like that's the guide piece. That's the centerpiece. That's the star in the sky. But that's only going to truly happen, right? The fluffiness of that is going to fade unless that is immediately backed by the hard work, the discipline, the commitment, the perseverance, the work, right? It's only going to work if you put in the work, the discipline, the commitment, etc. So at one point in time, Mr. Rogers went up north to Canada, and he was working for the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. And one of the executives, Francis Chapman, said this: Fred was so totally honest, a naturally honest person. He just couldn't be anything but himself. He just couldn't be anything but himself. And tying this to you being you, tying this to Mr. Rogers' life and career, even at the end of his career, toward the end of his career, during and up to the end of his career, he would doubt himself. So it wasn't like he just rode off into sunset on a pretty little white horse and woo. No, it was a constant battle, a constant struggle, and constant work to be happy, to be comfortable. And that's the idea of that hard work, commitment, etc. But what does so totally honest mean, right? How does that relate to you with others and you with yourself? So totally honest. If you think of the opposite of social media, right? And I'm in social media as much as you are. So I'm not speaking from a spot of exemption here. I'm speaking from a spot of inclusion. The opposite of social media, right? And I paint, you know, Dredd and I are very cognizant and intentional about painting a real picture. But even the picture you see, I mean, this energy, I'm not like this 24 hours a day, right? There are ups and downs and in-betweens. But being honest with yourself, understanding what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you need to work on, and not running from it. We're going to talk more about emotions and processing emotions. But to me, it's like, why learn? Why read? Why care about what I'm teaching you that I learned this week? Because all of those things contribute to this, to your ability to be honest with yourself and honest with others. Moving on to the next bullet point. This is something I'm going to read a quote. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, but this is one of those things, it's an action point that I hope this piques your interest enough for you to go watch this, to maybe even hit pause and Google it right now, YouTube it. So on May 1st, 1969, Mr. Rogers appeared before Senator Pasteur, right? A hearing, a Congress. And I had been told about this meeting, this hearing, from a former guest. I believe it's episode number 141, Corey Geishauser, who's a central Pennsylvania native, an acquaintance and now friend of mine who worked with and alongside Mr. Rogers for 20 plus years. And he told me about this video. He said, you would never believe it. Everyone thinks Mr. Rogers is so soft, but in this video, he's so direct and so, I'm not going to say overpowering because that's not the right word, but he's so in control. Let's say that. He's so in control, you'd never believe it. I was like, what are you talking about? So I got on YouTube. You, listener, if you want to watch it, search Mr. Rogers / or comma or nothing, and then Senator Pasteur, P-A-S-T-O-R-E. This is a quote from the book. This video is, quote, one of the most powerful pieces of video persuasion ever filmed. The mild-mannered Fred Rogers employed his gentle demeanor and soft voice to dominate the proceedings, silence a room full of politicians, and nearly bring the gruff committee chairman to tears. So Mr. Rogers was going to bat, right? He was going to bat for public education funding, and there was a bill on the table, I believe it was $20 million, And it was either going to be, yep, accepted, or no, axed and cut. So Mr. Rogers, excuse me, was elected, informally elected by the community, by the public television community. There was a network of people involved there to do this hearing. And it was relatively risky because at this point, Mr. Rogers wasn't what you and I know of Mr. Rogers today. He was just a guy with a TV show. He wasn't nationally known. But because of this, he became the champion of public television and television in general. And this was interesting, too, that through this, television was new at that time, but then quickly it became not educational. And they speak, and I'm not going to say negatively about it in the book, but it's just not of value, okay? Like stuff that didn't carry value, it didn't educate. And Mr. Rogers saw the medium TV as this opportunity, this perfect opportunity to teach and connect with and enhance and enrich people's lives. So he became the champion of public television in television in general. And it's a really neat video. And if you've been listening to AMX and have been listening to my dialogue commentary on the book, it's a really cool supplement to that, to see this guy in action in real life. Moving on to Tuesday's AMX Kids episode, I think you hear me smiling when I say AMX Kids, because I don't know how many kids are listening to it. I don't know how many grown-ups are listening to it, but I can tell you that this is one of my favorite times of the week, is creating these AMX Kids episodes. Because think of back when you were in middle school. I'm saying middle school because that's when it hit me the most. Maybe it was elementary, maybe it was high school, maybe it was college, maybe it was young adulthood for you. I don't know when it was. But just the frickin', I'm going to say, loneliness, angst, confusion, nervousness, unsureness, all of those things, doubt, uncertainty. Think of your style, your haircuts, the music you listen to, the clothes you wore, trying to fit in, wondering, who the heck am I? It's such a dynamic period of our lives that every week when I produce these episodes, one, I'm brought back, right? I'm brought back to those times. And as my wife, I talk to my wife knows everything about me. All those little things you try to like hide in the closet, I told her it all. And she is like, ugh, oh my gosh, come on, stop talking. Stop telling me about this stuff. But it's true. We just don't know who we are. So I'm brought back to that for me. But then I get into the shoes of the kids who are out there now. And these episodes are directed to them to help them sift through. To help them find a way, as we start with the first bullet point, to feel comfortable with themselves. And in this episode, one of the poignant parts was Billy Coleman. So I'm reading Where the Red Fern Grows. Again, tremendous book. And Billy has this experience where he goes into town. And he's from out of town. He lives in the mountains, in the woods, in the country, right? And he has a bad experience in town. And up to that point, he had always wanted to move in town and go to a regular school. And he gets home and he says, I don't want to move in town. And his dad says, but you have to for education. You gotta learn. And to which Billy responded, he was homeschooled, he responded, quote, hasn't Mama taught us how to read and write? Meaning, why do I need to go into school? Mom taught us how to read and write. And his dad responds, quote, there's more to an education than reading and writing. And so in Tuesday's AMX Kids episodes, which is AMX Kids 20, I dive into that idea and I explain to the kids, to me and to you as well, that it truly is about living. There's more to education than reading and writing. It's about living. It's about winning and losing and helping other people and feeling good and feeling bad and experiencing and growing and having all of these confusing emotions and then being curious and reading and learning and asking questions and observing and talking and then figuring it out. And then moving forward. That's truly what it's about. There's more to an education than reading, writing. That's an education, right? That's the life education that we're talking about. So whether you have kids, whether you are a kid, whether you're an adult who's a kid, regardless, just give it a listen. AMX Kids 20. New episodes come out every Tuesday, 4 p.m. They're tremendous. I'm reading kids' books, and I'm talking about them. I'm extracting life lessons, and they are full of them. Moving on. Speaking of kids, let's talk a little bit about how Mr. Rogers communicated with children. Now, I put out a post last night on Facebook. So my social media is at Charlie Spaniard across the board. Every social media outlet I have, it's at Charlie Spaniard. I put out a post yesterday listing all of the things off the top of my head. There was no research that went into that post. Off the top of my head, the things that I learned from reading Mr. Rogers' book. And one of the things was it taught me how to be a better parent, because the book really talks a good bit about child psychology, child development. It talks a lot about how Mr. Rogers' philosophies, how they're backed by science and research, and then how he acted on the show. I've incorporated some of that into my life with my kids. I'm a parent of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. It's important to me to communicate effectively. So Mr. Rogers, when communicating with children, quote, Rogers never told grieving children that everything will be all right. No such simplistic reassurances. Instead, he shared his feelings about death and loss in the extraordinary truth, reaffirmed repeatedly throughout the program that life does go on. So he was very real. He was very explanatory. He was direct yet tactful. He had purposeful communication. He didn't just say, it'll be all right, because I don't know, maybe it won't be all right, or maybe until it be's all right, it'll be very hard to get to that point. So he shared his feelings. Remember, one of the things, if you've been listening to AMX as well, you've heard me say something I got from the book, whatever is mentionable is manageable. And that's what we're talking about here, letting them know that life does go on, that there is death, there is loss. And then it talks about being reaffirmed repeatedly throughout the program. That's what I believe the golden value in AMX is. Right? It's not just 6 weeks or a week or 4 weeks or a year. It's every day. AMX is every day. And there are common themes that are outlined repeatedly, consistently over a period of time. Over, at this point, 610 episodes was today. It's repeated over and over, consistently over time. Purposeful, direct, tactful communication. Now let's talk a little bit about choices. Mr. Rogers says, quote, you rarely have time for everything you want in this life, so you need to make choices. And hopefully your choices can come from a deep sense of who you are. First and foremost, folks, you got to know who you are. How do you know who you are? Well, you do a fair amount of, I'm going to scratch that. You do a heck of a lot of introspection, a heck of a lot of reflection. But in order to introspect, in order to reflect, you've got to have experiences. So you've got to experience. You've got to win, and you've got to lose, and you've got to try, and you've got to be the champion, and then you got to be the loser, and then you got to have a cool girlfriend, and then you got to be dumped by your girlfriend, and then you got to pass the test with 100, then you got to fail a test, then you got to cry, then you got to smile, then you got to laugh, then you got to You got to do all that stuff. And then you introspect, and then you reflect, and then eventually you figure out who you are. In the Mr. Rogers book, I talk about it next week, but he says it wasn't written on the back of my hand in secret ink. No, you have to figure it out, right? You have to live it. You have to do it. You rarely have time for everything you want in this life, so you need to make choices. And hopefully those choices come from a deep sense of who you are. So it's this ongoing thing of figuring out who you are and making the choices that reflect who you are. It's not a here and a now. If you're 15, chances are you're not there yet. I'm 37. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I know that pursuit and the wholesomeness or the completeness, the wholeness or the completeness of knowing that I'm figuring it out every day with every book I read, with every page I read, with every piece of information that I synthesize, that I am figuring it out, and that my choices that I make as a person, as a human, reflect who I am. And if I'm continually figuring out and learning who I am, my choices are only going to get better and better and better. Moving on to Thursday's episode from Spanny. It's a talk I gave at Penn State. I had the opportunity in September to go on over to State College, Pennsylvania, back in my neck of the woods where I grew up. And it's a little more country out there. It's a little more country than where I am now. And I think I like that there country a little bit better. But I did a talk. It was a digital media and PR class. And I did a talk on basically building something with digital media and PR and starting from scratch and podcasts and videos and etc. And it was one of the most fun, I'm going to say funnest. It was one of the most fun talks that I've given because it was new. And I don't talk about that stuff often, but it's something in which I'm fully engrossed on a daily basis. It's my life. But one of the things I say in that episode is this, quote, you hear a lot of people, quote, I'm going to quote myself. You hear a lot of people say that most podcasts don't get to 3 episodes. I have almost 800 episodes, and now we have almost 900, because in fighting and wrestling, you just outwork the competition. That's the mindset that I bring into everything I do. I will outwork you. It's not that I think that I'm cool. It's just a decision that you make. That to me is kind of the name of the game. Of course, it's nuanced, and there's other things that we got to asterisk and bring in there. But if you bring the mindset that I'll outwork you, if you bring the mindset that I just won't stop. You know, I had a guy, I haven't released it yet, but I watched the documentary. I'm going to read his book, named Charlie Engle, who ran across the Sahara Desert. Was it 4,500 miles or something like that? Took him 100 days, ran, I don't know, like 70 marathons over the course of 110 days. Something and just crazy, right? Maybe, but to him it wasn't crazy. To him, he actually said to me in the interview, fighting is crazy. What I do is not crazy. But he just made a decision to not stop. And if you make that decision, just, I'm not going to stop, I'll outwork you. I'm not going to say you're always going to win, right? But you can always have the peace of mind knowing that you gave it your all. And if we're going back to one of my oldest mentors, or one of the people I've been talking about since the beginning of my speaking podcasting career, John Wooden, success is the peace of mind that is the direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. And deciding not to quit is key in that process. And then lastly, let's wrap it up with one more learning nugget for you to take and go live with. In a 1977 PBS Christmas special, Mr. Rogers said this, quote, I suppose the thing I'd like most to be able to give you is hope. Hope that through your own doing and your own living with others, you'll be able to find what best fits for you in this life. I'm going to highlight 2 dependent clauses or phrases in that sentence. Through your own doing, verb, and your own living. I'm talking about a verb there, not a gerund, right? A verb, living. I am living. I think that was the right terminology. I'll be corrected by Dredd, who's watching, if it wasn't. Or a participle. I meant to call it a participle. That's it, folks. That through your own doing and your own living with others, you'll be able to find what best fits for you in this life. That goes back to the whole theme of this show, is being happy with who you are, making the choices based on who you are, but really doing the work and the living to figure out exactly who you are. This, my friends, has been another week of What I Learned This Week. I sincerely hope you appreciate it. New episodes of AMX where I read books and talk about them. 8 minutes every Monday through Friday. AMX Kids comes out on Tuesdays, which are about 20 minutes, but it's the same format. I'm reading a kid's book and extracting the life lessons. Look, the whole point of AMX is my system of learning. AMX means to process content, a book, a documentary, etc., extract the learning points, connect it to you, my audience, and then give you something that you can take away with it to improve your life. That's the whole point of AMX. So AMX, Monday through Friday. AMX Kids on Tuesday. What I Learned This Week comes out on Saturday mornings, and interviews come out on Thursday. That right there, folks, is your one-stop shop for lifelong learning, so you can become the world's toughest lifelong learner. That's it, my friends. CharlieSpaniard.com has my book lists, has my speaking programs at Charlie Spaniard on social media. If you'd like to interact and talk books, training, philosophy, performance, human nature, dynamics, all that stuff, I want to geek out all day, every day about it. I'll see you on the flip side. Go read a book. Whew, gosh, that is fun. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. I'll see you all Monday morning for AMX 611. Or as my son says, 11. I'll see you. Have a great weekend. Don't forget. I don't know. Don't forget. See you.